Hi, then straight to that story about an American arms dealer who's accusing the Obama administration of using him as a scapegoat in order to protect Hillary Clinton. Mark Turi is his name. He was charged with running an illegal scheme to supply weapons to Libya, but he claims that Washington secretly gave its blessing to the program.
100% I was victimized to somehow discredit me, do whatever it took to protect their, next presidential candidate.
Turi's trial was set to begin on Election Day in November, but the case was dropped last week. Caleb Mopin's got more of the story.
It is illegal to sell weapons on the international markets without a license. It is especially illegal to supply those weapons to people associated with Al-Qaeda. Mark Turi may have done just that, but all the charges against him have been formally dropped. To understand the controversial case, let's go back to the 2011 revolt in Libya.
We have every reason to believe that Gaddafi would commit atrocities against his people. Many thousands could die.
So the U.S. reportedly started secretly arming rebel factions in a bid to overthrow Gaddafi. According to leaked emails, the then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton wrote, "The idea of using private security experts to arm opposition should be considered." That's where Mark Turi comes in. The private security contractor requested a license to directly send weapons to Libya, but each time his requests were denied. So Turi says he came up with a zero-footprint strategy in which the weapons got sent not directly to Libya, but via Qatar. And who was getting these weapons? Noble freedom fighters striving for democracy? Certainly not all of them. Some of them were in fact Al-Qaeda terrorists.
The CIA works to gain the release of the most deadly Al-Qaeda operatives, uses those people to spark an uprising.
Is it possible that the same terrorists who attacked the embassy in Benghazi had actually received U.S. weapons and support? Indirectly, of course.
In August of that same year, the United States government had said that this very man was, quote, a young rebel leader who allegedly fought in Iraq under the flag of Al-Qaeda. Were you aware that our folks were either wittingly or unwittingly meeting with Al-Qaeda on the ground in Benghazi, Libya, just hours before the attack?
I know nothing about this.
Turi wanted the files showing his communication with the State Department released so that he could defend himself in court. Those documents could have linked the zero-footprint scheme with the department's boss at the time, Hillary Clinton. But now, with the charges dropped, their contents will remain secret.
U.S. government was skirting its own laws, in this case the Arms Control Export Act, to send weapons to Libya. Documents that would have come out would have been very embarrassing to the administration. You know, what happened in Libya is that the U.S. was pretending to send weapons to moderates and ended up that they were all jihadists, they were all extremists. We're still pursuing the same failed and extraordinarily dangerous policy.
So the case is closed. Hillary Clinton denies everything, and the public is left with no way of knowing who is telling the truth. Caleb Mopin, RT, New York.
Furthermore, Mark Turi maintains he never sold any weapons to Libyan fighters and that he was eventually cut out of the scheme altogether. Political economist Con Hallinan told us Hillary Clinton's campaign would have been ruined if the case had come to trial.
Of course, the United States was supplying weapons to the Libyan rebels. It's very common for the U.S. to use private contractors. If the United States does it itself, then there's a trail that can be tracked. Libya was Hillary Clinton's operation. She designed the entire Libya operation. Now, it's been a complete catastrophe, and so she's backed herself away from it. If the trial had gone ahead, then a lot of stuff would have had to come out. It would be a disaster for her campaign.
America's homegrown terrorism is rooted in U.S. interventions abroad. That is a conclusion of an FBI report uncovered by investigative news website The Intercept. The study suggests that terrorists justify their actions by believing the U.S. military is carrying out violent atrocities in Muslim countries. Although the FBI states that it remains difficult, if not impossible, though, to predict what actually radicalizes particular individuals. The report was conducted in 2012, and U.S. officials are aware of the study's findings too, it seems.
Deranged or alienated individuals, often U.S. citizens or legal residents, can do enormous damage.
This summer, the US was hit by that deadliest terror attack since 9/11. Back in June, 49 died, over 50 wounded in that mass shooting inside the gay nightclub in Florida. Also, last December, a married couple carried out a similar mass shooting, that time taking the lives of 14 people in California. In both incidents, the male attackers were Muslim Americans.
The last two terrorist attacks on our soil, Orlando and San Bernardino, were homegrown.
We talked to retired U.S. Army Major General Paul E. Valley, who now represents something called Stand Up America, which describes itself as a network of patriotic Americans. He believes terror recruitment goes far beyond the borders of the U.S.
We've had a number of attacks in the United States since September 11th, 2001. Most of these attacks have been verified as radical Islamic jihadi attacks by what they call homegrown terrorists, but also the development of cells. So what we have here is a war, and now it's a war against radical Islamic terrorism. And the organizations and the countries that support this international radical Islam.
Thanks for being with us today. I hope you stay with us too throughout the course of the evening. A lot more news to come, including our programmes too. Talking of which, a couple of minutes from now, the US presidential campaign's been a barrage of smears, scandals and low blows. Peter Lavell's guest then, his latest one, to ask whether either candidate can claim the respect of America's voters. Good question. They debate it next.